This is going to be a quick review on the Murania AM transistor radio kit by the Four State QRP Group. And I had the opportunity a couple of nights ago to complete the kit. It's a really nice kit, and I'm going to just kind of go over several of the issues that I ran into as I was building the kit. And hopefully keep others from maybe running into some of the same problems that I had when I was building it. I'm going to take the cover off. I have the front case screws removed so we can take a look at the circuit board. And I'll turn it around here. One of the biggest challenges that people that are first-time builders of this kit are probably going to run into is winding the coil for the loop stick antenna on the radio. Now, the manual for the Murania kit suggests starting the coil windings an inch in and winding 31 turns and then stopping at 31 turns. Now, there's modifications for this radio that are readily available on the internet, so I won't go over that. The modification suggests 61 turns, but I'll kind of go over what worked for me. I'll get a close-up here of what I'm referring to. Now, the manual, like I mentioned, suggests going an inch in and winding 31 coil turns. What I ended up doing, just kind of experimenting with what worked best for me in building the kit, instead of going an inch in from the end of the ferrite rod, I went an inch and a quarter in and started my coil windings there. I ended the coil windings an inch and a quarter from the opposite end, and that kind of centered the coil windings on the ferrite rod by starting an inch and a quarter from one end of the rod and ending my coil windings an inch and a quarter from the opposite end. Now, I had to do a little bit of experimenting with this, and I would suggest that if you're watching this video, before you start building or before you strap down the antenna coil, just kind of building it like I've got mine, like I mentioned, an inch and a quarter from one end and ending the turns an inch and a quarter from the opposite end. I would leave enough wire on the antenna coil to kind of leave the loop stick hanging and just tack solder it into place. And if you have to, at least what worked for me, if you have to go back and, take two, what I did was just kind of experimenting with the antenna coil, just taking a couple of turns out at a time and seeing if that improves the sensitivity and the selectivity of the radio. But it worked for me, and hopefully it will work for other people, kind of doing it the way that I've gotten mine wound. I found that after I did it this way, that it really improved the sensitivity and the selectivity of the radio. Instead of being able to only receive maybe a couple of strong local stations, I'm now able to receive probably 15 or 20 stations. So it really helped the performance of the radio by winding this coil. It's critical that this coil winding is done right. Another thing that's kind of critical is this loop right here. The manual suggests, making the loop out of about an inch-long piece of that enamel wire that's provided with a kit, and leaving it perpendicular to the loop stick. Now, I mean, you can do that, but I found when I did that the performance of the radio wasn't where I wanted it. So, if you're having trouble, pulling in stations even after you've wound your loop stick the correct way, try just kind of turning this loop, in different directions, and kind of experimenting with the direction of how you've got that loop turned, and that should help with the performance of the radio. And then once you get it to where you're satisfied with the selectivity and the sensitivity of the radio, again, just kind of leave the loop stick in place. And for those that are wondering, yes, this coil has to be here. I tried leaving it out just out of curiosity, and it's got to be in there to complete the circuit. If you leave the loop out, the radio just, quite simply isn't going to work. So that 1-inch loop does have to be there. It's just a matter of, kind of, like I mentioned, just kind of turning this, just kind of playing around with this loop and getting it to where you're happy with the performance of the radio. Not a whole lot else to really talk about on this radio. It does have the mods performed on it. I did the mods as I was building the radio. The mods are readily available on the internet, so I won't go into a whole lot of detail on those. One thing that the assembly manual recommends is using some clear fingernail polish to kind of lock these nuts in place on the that hold on the screws that hold the speaker in place. And certainly, you can do that. If you have some clear fingernail polish on hand, it's that'll certainly work fine. What I chose to use was the blue thread locker instead of the fingernail polish. I think it's probably a little bit stronger, and so I chose to use that. But it's just kind of personal preference there. I didn't have any fingernail polish on hand, so I did have plenty of thread locker on hand, so that's what I used on the screws to hold these nuts secure for the speaker. About the only other thing that I would, like to change on this is probably that red LED. The LED that's provided with the kit, I think, kind of works as a voltage regulator, and it works fine as it is. I kind of prefer some of the softer LED colors like green or blue. I'm probably eventually going to replace that LED with a green one. I think it'll be kind of a neater look, but once again, just kind of a personal preference. And the LED that's provided with the kit will work fine, but I'm probably going to change mine out at a later date. One last thing that's not really mentioned in the manual is the placement of the holder for your 9-volt battery. I don't think there's a whole lot in the manual as far as like where to place it. It just basically tells you place it in the box that holds the circuit for the radio. It doesn't really give you an exact location of where to place this. What I found works for me is, there's not a whole lot of room. If you look at this board, component wise, yeah, it's kind of, minimalistic for components, but, some of these components are, rather large, so there's not a whole lot of room for a 9-volt battery. The best place that I found on mine to place it, and, you may not have any choice other than to do it this way, but like I said, the manual doesn't really mention this, but the best place that I found to hold a 9-volt battery is directly under this tuning capacitor. So, like, if I put the cover back on this radio, like the cover, if the cover's like that, if I flip it forward, go down here to the bottom side of the case, I went probably about an inch in from the side of the case here, and just drew a straight horizontal line with my Sharpie, and I ended up putting the battery holder there. And now when I put the case in, there's plenty of room for that battery. It doesn't really interfere with any of the components or anything. The case fits securely right there. All I have to do to secure the top part of the radio to the case is just go ahead and put my 4 screws in, and that'll work fine. So in closing, this is a really nice kit. It went from being a mediocre performing kit when I had it completed to really now being a really nice radio. Instead of just picking up maybe 2 or 3 local stations, now I'm picking up stations really all over the AM broadcast band. I think the furthest station that I've been able to receive so far is WBAP down in Dallas-Fort Worth. I live here in central Kentucky, so that's pretty much the furthest station that I'm able to hear so far. The other night I was listening to WSB down in Atlanta when they had the tornado outbreak. I was listening to the news and weather reports overnight from WSB in Atlanta. So this radio, it's for what it is. To be able to have that kind of sensitivity is and selectivity it's really nice. I highly recommend the kit. I don't think one other thing that I mentioned by kind of winding the loop stick coil the way that I did, starting 1.25 inches in and ending 1.25 inches from the opposite end, it really improved the selectivity of the radio, and also the dial settings now are pretty much spot on. Like say I wanted to listen to 700 WLW out of Cincinnati, it's WLW at 700 on the AM dial is going to come in right on the 7 mark on this. It's pretty much spot on frequency wise with the dial markings on the radio. So I'll close out the video here. Hopefully these tips help first-time builders. And if you like the video, please like and subscribe, and I'll take any comments and try to answer any questions that anybody may have for me that's building this kit. Great little kit, value-wise, for the money. You get a really nice radio in the end. So until next time, this is Mike saying 7-3.